At one point, I had pushed back the engineer. I'm like, do we really need to replace this? Pretend we weren't renovating it. It would be fine, right? And he more or less was like, the wall has officially failed and is at risk of collapsing.
Welcome to the Modern Craftsman podcast. Nick, have you ever set trusses before?
Personally?
Yeah.
No.
We were recording offline, but I spoke with my buddy John Marley, who's also Nick's buddy, who's a really good builder. He works for builders. I guess technically he's a superintendent. I don't know his job role. I may be screwing it up, but he's building his own house. And he's like, I sent him my truss drawings and was like, does this number look right? He's like, yeah. Are they setting them? No. And then he told me about his house where he has some framers who are Amish because he went with a pole barn style. Or a pole building. And he was like, my framer had this custom rig that delivered the trusses, then laid them flat, and then lifted them, installed them, and he sent me this video. And I was like, maybe I'll hire him. I've never set trusses before. And he's like, oh, I set my first truss when I was 14. They're easy. And I was like, I don't know, maybe on just like a straight garage roof, but when I have multiple planes of the roof intersecting, I don't know if that's something. I'll try anything once, but I don't know if that might be above my pay grade.
This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. So I'm talking to Andersen Windows now. Well, actually, let's talk about Ecopon, because we wrapped up Ecopon and we worked with them with their lift slide product. I will say, first off, we flew to Oceanside to check out the manufacturing facility, which is sick. It's not as big as I thought, which I actually appreciated, but it's because it's a highly specialized shop that's only doing their lift slide product. Yep. But they, Vincent from If Possible really pushed the limits with Andersen in their lift slide product, because ultimately we were using lift slides not just for doors but windows. We were like literally taking a lift slide and making it non-operable just so we got this consistency of profiles throughout the whole house. Long story short, they were super easy to work with, and frankly excited to work with us on kind of like a really architecturally driven project such as Ecopon. And being there the other day, we got these cool pocketing sliding doors that have then like a pocketing screen door.
Yeah.
And it was freezing outside, but the house was toasty warm, and I opened it, and it's basically opening the entire side of the house up. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, even in the winter, it's like to have the little cold air blowing in. And someone commented, it was like, oh, I love the fact that you can just open it and let the dog out. And I was like, or let the coyote in.
Yeah. It's true.
But no, they were super great to work with on that project, and excited to see it wrapped up. And if you guys want to see the behind the scenes of that shop tour, we posted it on the NS Builders YouTube channel, and then we got a ton of content being shared just of that shop. Of the shop tour, and then we have some installation videos coming of the actual product on Ecopon, because there's a lot of details that you probably wouldn't recognize unless you watch the video and see the actual how-to.
Yeah, and speaking of how-to, I recently with Fine Home Building did a how-to on one of their pivot doors, which can be a very complicated install. So if you have something like that coming up, or you're just interested, we break that down pretty comprehensively, so you can check out how you would install a pivot door in one of your projects, from accounting and planning from the framing stage before the door arrives through final finish, popping that door into place. So if you want to check that out, you can find that at finehomebuilding.com.
Yeah, and if you guys want to see more about Andersen Windows, andersenwindows.com. That's ANDRSEN windows.com. And this podcast is also brought to you by Harnish Workwear. Guys, spring is coming. Everyone's going to want new t-shirts. My team's already asking if we're updating the t-shirts, if they can keep wearing the old ones, because I am notorious for changing the design ever so slightly and telling them to throw away or archive the old model. But if you guys do not have work shirts for your company, reach out to Harnish Workwear and get into their H label program. They can either take a previous design, a sketch design, or they can start and handle all the designs super quickly and super efficiently and print them on, I think, the highest quality t-shirt that I've ever worn, because it's literally the only t-shirt I wear with different branding and or no branding on it, because it apparently makes my muscles look big. But I just think I have big muscles.
They're nice t-shirts.
I thought you were going to say those are nice muscles.
They're nice muscles too. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I do cheat on Harnish and I do wear other brand t-shirts, but the Harnish t-shirt is a nice t-shirt, especially when it's branded for your company. So I should probably take a note out of your book though and throw some of my old t-shirts away and get some fresh ones, because mine are a little tired. A little tired.
Check it out, harnishworkwear.com. I've only done trusses on one project, and it was the Steve Teague project, and we used them only on the garage. And I remember, I mean, if you can remember back, Chevcon framed that house. I mean, they did a killer job. The main roof was just super complicated with all the swoops, and they basically built like site trusses. That roof is like unbelievably. It's like 12-inch on center LVL rafters, like nuts. But the garage, they end up, our super at the time ended up ordering trusses for that. I'm like, what's the point in that?
Yeah,
because they literally don't want the storage above the garage, and it was just cheaper and faster to get some trusses. It saved a couple bucks, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess like it like to me, it was like
that was like the easiest part.
Yeah, but it's also, I'm like, man, I would want the opportunity to then have that as storage, but whatever.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I always see people set trusses, and I think watching it is like, it's very, is rhythmatic a word? Like there's like a rhythm to
Rhythmic? Maybe?
Thank you.
Arithmetic.
It's very arithmetic. It's very rhythmic, where like they're just flying up and you see the guys like basically tack them in place and they're just getting them. And when I watch it, I'm like, man, I feel like if you screw something up, they just all topple. It's like it's literally like setting dominoes.
Yeah, there's like no shear.
So no, I've never set trusses. We have a project right now, that is, the house is 200 years old. Let's just start there. And it's a little bit of a design build, difficult project, but the client has wanted to use trusses for the roof forever, which is replacing the existing roof on the house.
That was just their dream?
That's a longer story for this, not for the podcast. But I think we've crossed the opportunity of just like, all right, this doesn't make sense to do trusses. Like we need to frame this on site traditionally. Like it's just, you're dealing with an old house. It's just a 200-year-old house, and we're trying to use like predetermined. Like,
and you're verifying stuff in the field, nothing straight.
No, and literally like we've had already two scenarios where like the steel showed up the wrong size and the floor trusses showed up the wrong size in areas, but it's like, of course it did. Like you can measure that 100 times, but you're going like the house is 200 years old. It's not going to fit the right way. The steel was a stupid mistake, but beyond that, so it's just like I had a hard time. I was like, this needs to be more traditional. Like it's a 200-year-old home. We should be using traditional framing and just like framing it like they did 200 years ago, just better.
Yeah.
And that actually had we're going down this weird path here.
So no, you haven't set trusses. No, I'm just kidding.
So I was like, thank you. But so we're also doing, we got a couple brownstone like gut renovations and like, I mean, floor framing out, new floor framing. And most of the time we're using like an I-joist or traditional like lumber.
Yeah.
Like our Mansard project, we ended up framing that with all traditional KD. Just for the sake, we didn't feel as though the I-joists were worth the extra squeeze, and we had short spans, and we were able to do it with regular KD lumber. That was really it. But a lot of times we see the I-joist, but we are there's another a newer product that is essentially a truss joist. So it's like a 2x4 truss joist, but the end of it is this isn't a word, cuttable, trimmable.
Trimmable. Yeah. I saw that.
So I'm like, dude, this is perfect for brownstones.
Oh, we
because, like,
talked about this actually.
yeah, so it's like this is perfect where it's like you can just cut, because otherwise, like, you know, you're cutting an eye joist anyway.
Yep.
So the end of the joist is an eye joist. So now you get the benefit of like an open web in the middle, so that you can run all your utilities, because we have sprinkler pipes. Like in Boston, if you do a gut renovation, like framing and everything, you got to put sprinklers in because it's an attached single family. Some people will argue me on that, and like by building code, it's not a building code. It's the fact that when you do that, you trigger a long form permit, and when you trigger a long form permit in Boston, the fire department gets to look at it, and then they get to like add whatever requirement they want. And you can fight that, but good luck. But having the open web trusses is nice for all the, like, you know, you're going to simplify a lot of the mechanicals, not everyone, but simplify a lot of them rather than having to hog out the web of an eye joist.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stoked to use that. I'm going down. This is a train of thought, dude. So in this like exploration of materials, I been following, you know, I follow a lot of architects and builders, actually primarily architects in New York City, because I just think that New York has much better design. And this architect posted a gut renovation brownstone he was doing the other day, and they're friggin' using light gauge metal floor joists. And I'm like, whoa, walk me through this. Because literally when we're replacing the floor joist in Boston, a joist is typically pocketed in the brick. And if for those that are listening, like when you have a piece of wood, like a floor joist pocketed into a brick wall on left and right, they actually
with a building beside it.
They cut the joist. It's called a fireman's cut on an angle. So if the middle of the joist burns and falls, it doesn't pull the brick with it. It basically is like allows the joist to fall out of the pocket.
Yeah, I don't know why. For some reason, I just saw that recently. So, like, from a visual perspective, if right, you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I have no idea what he's talking about. Imagine a joist that's let into a wall on either side, so it's like inside of the wall, and you chop the center of it out, and the load falls. It's going to rip those outer walls with it
it's gonna
as
try
it
to pull
collapses,
right?
Because the top of the joist, so that they trim that, so if it does burn in the center and then it goes to collapse, it doesn't pull the outer wall with it.
And they trim that basically going from a plumb cut, which would pull the brick because it would get caught, to an angle cut. So like the very top of your joist is barely into the pocket, allowing it to fall out. So with that being said, you typically, like, an engineer will not allow you to reuse that pocket and pocket in new joist. They're like, no, you need a new detail. And the detail is running an LVL ledger around the entire perimeter, anchoring it with Hilti anchors and epoxy, and then infilling in between it with hangers. And it's like, man, like, why?
Basically creating a deck.
Creating a deck, right? And it's just so much labor, so much work. And I see this.
What are the structural? Is it brick in the brownstones?
Yeah.
Is it like
It's either 2 or 3 wide brick.
Yeah.
So, and they're just like, yeah, it just doesn't check out with structural. But I'm talking to this architect in New York, and he's literally removing an old joist, taking a light gauge metal floor joist, which is spec'd for floors, right? Mm-hmm. It's 17 feet wide, a narrow brownstone, and then putting it back in the pocket and grouting it back in. And I'm like, you're like, the engineer's cool. He's like, yeah, he's totally fine.
I mean, it won't burn through.
Why metal? He's like, because honestly, getting in and around a brownstone in New York City, like lumping around hundreds of pounds of lumber is just a pain in the ass for that, guys. These are light and strong. And so I was like, I went running into Julian's office. I'm like, Julian, look at this. He goes, oh, that's sick. I'm like, should we? He goes, stop. We are already in motion.
Yeah.
Like, do it on the next one. And I'm like, why doesn't anyone do it? He goes, I think it's an engineer thing. I'm like, it's got to be.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just
I
like,
also think that like some people, I mean, even light gauge framing, a lot of people frame basements light gauge, and it's like if you don't work with light gauge all the time,
yeah,
like the blocking and the nailing and whatever
yeah.
finishes you're attaching to it, like there has to be considerations for it down
Yeah.
the road. That I think a lot of people are just like, what am I going to do with flooring? What am I going to do with subflooring? Like it is just, some
I would
people
agree.
just,
Yeah, I mean, especially for trim and cabinetry and stuff, but for floors, you're literally putting resilient channel and screwing to it just like you would
oh
strapping.
yeah, for sure.
And then floors, you're just using a self tapper floor. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'd love to try it. But it's just it's funny because again, going back to like brownstone, that we have this project. It's called the One House that we started, and we're combining two brownstones or two row homes. They're not brownstones. Brownstone is a type of row house, but these are two brick row houses, and we're combining them into a single family. And there's an end unit, and the wall had a belly in it, and it was against grade, and it looked like basically, I mean, there was no cracking. It just looked like the wall was either built that way or
Yeah.
like somehow over 30, 100 years, like slowly crept in and just basically everything moved together. And I had kept, we were, unfortunately, that, like, I guess let's share the nitty gritty here. Unfortunately, this was a conversation we had early on in the project, client and architect, and it was kind of glossed over as like, yeah, that's definitely an issue that we need to come back to and address, but right now let's focus on the core of the project. And when we got into it further, that ended up being like a really big issue and ultimately like a big cost. That it was a very difficult conversation with the client. Like, it was kind of one of those, like, how did we not know? And unfortunately, we did know, we just didn't have the feedback from the structural engineer as to like what was really going to be required. And we worked through it, but ultimately, at one point I had pushed back the engineer. I'm like, do we really need to replace this? Like, pretend we weren't renovating it. It would be fine, right? And he more or less was like, no, dude, like the wall has like officially failed and is a failure and is at risk of collapsing. And I was like, it can't be that bad. And then we excavated. I'm like, oh, it's actually 12 inches.
Oh my God.
Like, pushed in 12 inches. So we posted on our Instagram, but so the way that this worked, which is wild to me, is that they punched, I don't even know, a half a dozen holes in the wall and put steel beams through the wall, and then brace the wall up, and then put staging on inside of the wall, outside of the wall, and then basically had these needle beams, needle being the beam that passes through the wall,
Yeah.
and then another horizontal beam that basically pulled the weight off of the wood framing above. And then they just knocked the wall out from
Remove the
underneath
brick
it.
wall. Yeah.
And I'm standing outside. I'm like, there's 3 levels of brick floating on top of 6 steel beams that are only supporting 8 inches at a time. So what, like 6 times 8, 48
Yeah.
inches of a 30 something foot deep wall. And it's just there.
I mean,
And
dude, if you've ever seen them move a house, they literally just like cobble together cribbing to lift the house up.
but it's not brick.
No, it's not brick, but like it's still,
To see brick float
yeah.
and not just like want to fall apart
out,
down,
yeah.
like that was weird. We are through that. Like, needle shoring is coming out in 3 days. Like, wall has been rebuilt and onward. But it was just like, it was the same conversations. I'm like, do we really need to put a ledger? Do we really need to anchor this with Hilti? It's and the engineer is not he's like no fun at all. He's like,
Yeah.
nope, math is math.
I
I'm like,
mean,
can't we just have a
like if
fun
you
conversation?
think about it, right? If you had a room where a brownstone that's a rectangle and you just nailed wood as a ledger around the perimeter and then put floor joist with no structural, the only way that floor would collapse is if it fell perfectly straight down that. Like, no, but seriously, have you ever got something jammed like inside of another shape that it's close? That like if that skewed at all, like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, let's play that out, right? All right, so you jam them tight. You're pressure fit. You're good. 10 years from now, neighbor decides to do a renovation, pulls out his floor, his wall comes flying in, and then all of a sudden your unit just drops.
Not that tight. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of times I will, on older homes, I do tell myself, well, it's been that way for so long.
I know.
Like, what's going to happen now? But
it doesn't matter.
No, and it doesn't mean it's the right thing. I mean, there's a ton of people around our area use CMU block for foundation walls. Mm-hmm. So you pour your footing, you have a CMU block. They're putting rebar down. Like there's no even really mechanical connection with the footing necessarily all the time. Like,
wait, sometimes you don't drill rebar vertically?
Sometimes they are, and sometimes like on a crawl space they're not required to, because the backfilling and then the slab on the inside is holding it in place.
Is a slab reinforced?
No, it's like a rat slab. So like,
what?
Yeah, so and then like all they're doing is they're setting block, and then they're putting rebar down every so often,
but not
in these hollow channels. No, and then just grouting them full.
What about, do you do bond beams?
No. Which,
so
like,
no horizontal beam with rebar?
Nope. And so like they'll have a lot of times those walls locked into the bottom, locked in up top, they're failing because of hydrostatic pressure, and because like the water goes into the CMU block, and then even people put French drains in, and then they're not punching through the interior to let that water drain out, so it just has this hydrostatic pressure that it's bowing. And we ran into it on a basement renovation, and the two options were like carbon fiber strapping, which you basically just like epoxy carbon fiber onto the existing wall, and that's supposed to hold it from bowing anymore. Or what we elected to do was knock out a certain amount of holes every so often on the top, the middle, and the bottom, and then we put rebar into it, and then tied the rebar where it crossed and overlapped in the center, and then grouted those solid. But like, to me, that whole situation is so sketchy, and it's just typical of what, like, I remember we did it on an addition, and I was like, there's nothing really that we're tying into one thing or another. And it's like, nope, that's what locks it in place. It's locked in on the inside, locked in on the outside.
It's crazy, like, just the way some stuff gets repaired, rather like the minimum viable product. I think about going back to row homes, like, you see these stars on the outside of brick walls a lot. They're like steel stars, and it's a piece of all thread that then they run back into the house, and basically
it's just a tie back with a decorative front.
Yeah, and I have a video saved in my phone. I got to post it as a reel, but it's like, when you look at what it's doing, it's like that's what's holding the wall from falling.
Yeah,
it's like, yep. Instead of fixing it correctly.
It's pretty crazy.
I didn't even think of carbon fiber though, because I said everything. I'm like, what if I just put steel against the wall and weld it and put like an angle down to the foundation? Nope. And I was just trying to avoid replacing this wall, which when we excavated, like, thank God we didn't, and got the client on board with it. But man,
yeah, I don't know. The carbon fiber is kind of like DIY type crap too, where it's like you can just do it. I just sent you a picture of the addition that we did with zero vertical rebar coming out of the footing that the CMU literally just sits on top of.
It's crazy. I mean, we did going back to Steve Teague's house, like that house, I remember doing the foundation. First off, the foundation was too complicated. I think we counted that there was 54 corners on that foundation. It was stupid. We should have simplified the foundation. Looking back, I mean, I mean, it wasn't even about a cost savings. It was just like from a simplicity standpoint. But thank God we had a great team on that because they did a good job. But the when we were putting all the rebar in it, we were, Hayes and O'Neill was the engineer on that, and they do bigger projects. Like they're primarily commercial based, and I know them personally, and like they always work with us and help us out, and they're great. Like they understand engineering, and they factor in like a good safety. But my concrete guys, like, dude, I've never seen this much rebar in a residential foundation, and it wasn't a complicated site, like at all. It wasn't like we didn't have any water, like we had very little water issues. It wasn't bad soil, like it was just. He's like, there's so much rebar in here, and we have these big windows. And he goes, I've never seen a rebar detail like this around the windows. And in the same breath that he said that, he goes, and every time I've done these, they always crack. And I'm like, I was like, I think that is to prevent these from cracking. And he laughed and he goes, yep, that is probably what we're dealing with here. He goes, dude, I've done foundations with no rebar. I'm like, concrete? No rebar? He goes, yeah. Most of the time, it's like guys just want like, a couple verticals here and there. I'm like, dude, we're doing vertical and horizontal on every wall. It's like, no wonder you have these concrete repair companies. I mean, foundation repair companies.
I mean, you look at every system, it's different. I mean, a lot of areas of the country, and I mean, it's not even areas of the country, but they'll basically scrape off topsoil and then just dig a strip footing in the ground and have earth formed footings, which are interesting to me. Like nothing more than they just look like shit. Like from a structural perspective, there's nothing wrong with that, but that always blows my mind. Like on a site where you're raising grade or you don't have frost issues, that you can just literally scrape off topsoil, dig a strip footing, and then tamp it, put stone in, and be like, there's our formwork, we're good to go. On our house, we're using superior walls, which is no footing. So you're digging, you're excavating, you're tamping, and then you're putting in a crushed stone detail, and then the prefab concrete walls, insulated concrete walls, are getting set on top of that and then epoxied together, so there's not a separate footing.
So how are you? I love the superior wall idea, and I've tried to use it on a couple projects. And to be clear, we have not used it yet. I'm curious. I guess the footing is intended to spread that foot, like the
I mean, the foundation wall is wide enough, and the engineering is wide enough, right? That it's wider than a typical concrete wall.
It is.
And and then like the way, so I could show you cross sections of it, but it's basically the precast wall, and then they have the 2x4s are concrete in the wall, and then they have the aluminum or the steel for the studs, and then it's insulated as well.
So how do you detail the vapor barrier into that wall?
I would do it as if it were a more traditional or like a poured wall, right, where you would bring that up onto the wall some.
And you're taping it to the foam?
So like the inside of the assembly essentially is flat once it's finished.
Yeah, but flat with drywall, because it's right.
No, so I'm not finishing the interior of our wall.
Oh, so your foam and your steel stud are all flat.
Yeah, it's all on one plane. Here, let me pull up. I could probably.
No one can see it.
Yeah, but at least I could show you.
Oh, all right. To anyone listening, you're not part of this conversation.
Sorry. Let's see.
That makes sense. And then, so you'll and you have to frame the first floor before you do the slab, right?
Yeah, so you're gonna excavate, and then you're gonna brace that, and then you can backfill, and you can pour your slab at that point. because you don't have anything tying it into the.
Mm-hmm.
They have, I mean, it's as far as the engineering goes, it's pretty neat. They have a ton of information like for all different cases and when you need additional bracing and what your connections need to look like, even as far as your floor joist, if they're horizontal, if they're perpendicular, how much blocking you need back to tie everything together. Like it's all spec'd out and spelled out pretty clearly. And then obviously like everything from a load perspective. Let me see. Authorization form. Oh, here's a guidebook. I can share my screen with you. Oh yeah, we're gonna look through this. This is gonna be sweet. Look at this. I'm gonna be sharing my screen and everything.
On the podcast?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, guys, if you aren't listening to this on YouTube or watching us on YouTube, well, number one, you would have known I just picked up my phone to text someone. And number two, you're going to... Whoa!
Can you see that?
I can. Look at this. Now you guys have to follow our YouTube. We're going to look through... What do we got there?
Oh, there's a lot of pages. We're not going to go through this whole thing.
Oh,
right?
gotcha.
They're
Okay.
basically speccing a distance that you need to go out for the bearing width based on the load and your soil classification, right? If you have 1 story, 2 story, if you have 2 story, it's going to have to go out wider and it's going to have to be thicker stone. So we're only doing 1 story. They give you all like the soil tables for what type of soil you have. You can obviously over engineer it.
Not gonna lie, I'd probably just put this in ChatGPT and be like, "Here's my soil based on my geotech report. Tell me what to do."
And then they have obviously their drainage spec, how much drainage they want, where they want it going, what your over dig is. I'm trying to find a cutaway of their walls for you.
Yeah, because I remember them. Yeah, right there. I remember them being thinner, and then they fatten only at the stud location.
Yeah, so like
it's like concrete ribbing.
Yeah, and the stud is a concrete stud. So like realistically, they even have specs. If you ever want to go open them up, how you can actually cut into them and put an opening in them or tie into them, which is also pretty neat. But they basically have everything mapped out as far as what the options are. I know a lot of guys who use them for additions because, like, around here, again, you're doing an addition with...
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's cool.
You're doing an addition and you have to dig it, and then you need your footings framed up, and then you need a footing inspection, and then you got to get guys come out and do block work, raise block, and it's like you can get all this engineered and done.
Yeah.
In no time and have them deliver. And like, honestly, dude, from a price perspective, it's so inexpensive.
Dude, this is the topic that this podcast is centered around. The reason people don't do it, your comment right there, oh, the price is reasonably inexpensive, or like it's even more, like the reason people don't do it is because it just takes forethought. And that's the fucked up part. Like, hey, rather than just figuring it out and laying it out on the site and letting this come together as a quote unquote foundation, what if you were to plan for this and order something and have it show up and have it be done? No, I'll just cobble it together on site.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, you know, I've obviously promoted that through our content. Like White Oak was fully panelized. Echo Pond was fully panelized. We, you know, foundation system, we actually used the mono slab, for Echo Pond, which great system, bad project to use it on. But the more I keep thinking about the way we build, it's like I just want to continue to push the envelope of how much can we build before it shows up. And I've made the reference before, but the Encore Casino, there's one here in Everett, Mass, and the thing got built in like record time. I think like 2 years or something like that. And I mean, I'm sure there was multiple shifts, and I'm sure there was like it wasn't all, you know, unicorns and rainbows. But I went there with Meg, and we stayed a night because we wanted to check out the hotel. And I'm looking around. I'm like, this place, for the fact that this building was built in whatever 2 years, and the quality in which this room looks is truly unbelievable. And, you know, and I was talking to someone like, yeah, but, you know, they had everything done. Like all the interior doors were made completely finished, and all they had to do was install them. I'm like, yeah, and look at the quality of them. Like, it's literally like a 10 out of 10 quality. It's like, yeah, but like they did all of it off site. I'm like, this is my point, guys. Like, we continue to cobble material together on site piece by piece. It's like, why? Like, why aren't we leveraging the time that it takes to really work through and put all of the manufacturing elsewhere and assemble this stuff on site? And Superior Walls, I mean, that's, they're not a sponsor
They
here.
should be.
They should be. But like, that's a great example. It's like, it's just, hey, it takes you, probably a dozen emails back and forth and some, checks and, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and hey, your foundation is just going to show up and be done.
Yeah, and like I said, from a price perspective, granted, I mean, if you're designing a fully custom house with all different elevations and offsets and a walkout basement, a different grade throughout the property, maybe it doesn't make sense. I've never priced it, to be honest, but like for my perspective, where everything's a single level, we're doing crawl space, so they have a precast crawl space panel that like makes sense with the grade of our house. But even a full basement, if you ever intend to finish down the road, insulated, it has studs, it has steel gauge studs on the inside with channels or pass-throughs for utilities. It's insulated. It makes a ton of sense. And from like a cost perspective, I couldn't touch it with any other system. Like CMU poured foundation wouldn't be close. And so their price is to fabricate, deliver, and install. So you provide a crane pad for them, they provide the crane, and they install it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so we were at the Builder Show, and we were at the Certainty booth, and we were looking at a bunch of their stuff. Like a lot of people know Certainty for their roofing and their underlayments and things like that, but their prefab system. Are you actively exploring that?
I am. I don't have answers on that yet. For me, based on my build, so it's an OPA panel, one precision assembly, which they're like just getting in their feet wet with marketing it, but they're basically creating a double stud wall, a stud wall with insulation, and then all your vapor barrier. They can set your windows for you, and then they have their I forget the name of their actual vapor barrier on the inside. So they have WRB on the outside, then vapor barrier on the inside. They'll set your windows. It's insulated. They have a secondary stud wall that's a service cavity for you running all your utilities. Mm-hmm. What they're typically doing is taking a foundation, and they're doing the floor and panels, the wall and panels, and the roof and panels. So you have an insulated roof assembly too. My house is not designed with an insulated roof assembly. I'm doing a lot of stuff for simplicity's sake at this point in my life and the way that we're building, and I have a vented roof assembly, and my roof is trussed, which is how we got started on this. So I won't have a conditioned attic space. We will have a conditioned crawl space. So for me, if I move ahead with them, it would just be doing
walls,
the walls, which also like,
and ceiling and floor.
Yeah, like, which makes sense for me. And like, honestly, even if so my floor's somewhat different. I had this conversation with you offline too, because we have a crawl space and it's going to be conditioned. I want to be putting my utilities down there. Mm-hmm. So it's designed right now as the floor being hung, which is an added cost, right? So we're not going to have beams underneath. Mm-hmm. The beams will all be flush beams, and we'll have clear span in the crawl space. So if I need to go down there and service stuff, if there's any sort of storage, just like utilities, cleanliness, it'll look much nicer. All the ductwork's going to be down there. So instead of keeping everything low and having it be close to the ground, we can tuck everything up against one floor. So technically they could be doing that. But like, even a system like that, I could technically, as a like one-man show, two-man show, I could get the foundation done, have Superior Walls set it. I could hang the floor myself because it's all in sections with flush beams. And then I could get somebody like Certainty to crane in all of the walls with the windows in them, and then have the roof prefabbed as a truss roof, and then it's just sheeting the roof.
That'd be the most
and
epic 2 weeks ever.
yeah, and like, yeah, there's other options, right? I could get the floor done. I could get the roof done also. It would change the design. Maybe it's something I would have considered from the outset had I known that. But also, again, not looking to complicate things. There's a ton of options that you don't like. It doesn't need to be everything. It can just be certain components of that that reduce the manpower that you need or the time on site that you need, and you're meeting all of your needs. Which I just think it's cool to have those options out there. Especially with me, it's a single floor house, right?
Yeah.
So like,
I just
it's
love
not
the
that
idea
complicated.
of like pushing design, but finding ways to simplify it like in the most creative ways possible. There's this awesome case study, and I have no idea how to find it, but there was this like old ruin of like a stone hut in the woods. Like it was probably 10 foot by 10 foot, and no roof was left, like an old like window. And they built, and I think did it with mass timber, but they built basically like a box, like a really high quality, like architecturally cool box with glass windows, and they dropped it into the stone ruin and then put a roof on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that's so sick. Like and it was like an architectural moment, right? Like it was probably wildly expensive for this silly thing. But the thought of that is like the for me, like that's where my brain goes in terms of like simplicity and like finding creative ways to accomplish things. And I think about white oak, for example. That was all stud and sheathing, which if you read YouTube comments, apparently I have a huge European audience because they all make fun of us that we build our house with toothpicks and paper. And they're all like, yeah, we build it out of CMU. I'm like, dude, I want to build a CMU house. I want to build a concrete house. I want to build a house that is like a mass wall. But what I'm really interested in is like the mass timber and CLT panels. And, and I've been interested with that since I went to Switzerland with Siga and like toured some of this stuff. Like Rengle, I did a video on our YouTube channel and like toured that manufacturing facility. It's sick. And like they're doing they are actually doing more of a wall panel assembly where they're using like finger jointed Nordic lumber, really high tolerance lumber in kind of a stud format. And then other companies are just basically using these like massive sheets of CLT panels. And part of me, going back to that ruin conversation, like I've always had this idea of ripping the back of a row house off, like opening the walls off the back, like take the brick wall off the back of the row house and sliding in like a CLT like structure where it's like, then you have these like 4-inch thick CLT floor panels. And it sounds obnoxious, but I bet if you really took the time and like figured that out, there would be some sort of, I don't know, I'm not going to say savings or cost savings, but like it would be an interesting study to understand, like, could you actually pull that off and what would it require?
Yeah.
Because at face value, you'd be like, oh, you're going to have a moment frame, it's going to be steel, and it's going to make really, okay, keep pushing, like keep challenging that until it makes sense. And I think that's where my desire to continue to think about how do we build more of this stuff in kind of like a product format or a manufacturing facility. Going back to white oak, that wall was, stud and plywood, and it was 2x6 wall, 1/2-inch sheathing on the outside with a 2x3 or a 2x4 wall. And it's like that was in frame and you're walking around, it's like, man, there's a lot of lumber here. Mm-hmm. And then I was thinking about the exterior insulation where it's like, all right, now we have 5 inches of exterior insulation on the wall, 8 inches on the roof, and I'm driving a 12-inch screw through that insulation and strapping and hoping I hit an 1.5-inch wide rafter, right? If that was a CLT panel and the whole house was just like these mass CLT panels that literally got manufactured on a CNC and then clipped together like a puzzle, now you just have full timber wall, and now you're wrapping it with, number one, you're getting the R value of full timber, and number two, now you're wrapping it with insulation, and you're just getting screws wherever. You're just making
Yeah.
sure it gets through the insulation.
I mean, even the way that, like, we were speaking about John Marley and his house, and he priced his house as a conventional frame. I don't think he ever intended to have any sort of crawl space. I believe it was always slab on grade. But when he started looking into pole building type structures, or what Kyle does, and the ease of construction, the efficiency, the insulating, air sealing, detailing, and the options, and what doors it opens, it somewhat becomes a no-brainer, as far as how you're doing that, and the cost savings for him were pretty substantial with doing that based on his design. But it was the same thing, like, get all your utilities in, like the whole shell of the house was framed, dried in, and sided, windows in before he even has a floor inside.
Yeah.
All his utilities are all in the slab, his radiant and all that stuff. But then, like, just the detailing without a bunch of stud framed walls with just larger timber and then infill sections, it's pretty smart. Like, it's almost simplifying things to the point where it's making an overall better build. I think it's just going to take people understanding how to build that way. But yeah, the way that we build and stick frame and platform framing, from, especially with today's lumber and how much it moves and shrinks, like, it's not the way to go. It doesn't make it doesn't make that much sense. And I think that there are other ways to do it that are probably much better. It's just not the norm.
It's not the norm, and it's like, and it takes more thought to like think through that. Where it's like, oh no, just no, we'll just wait till the plaster's done and then we'll measure for cabinetry. And like we tried, at White Oak, we tried to have hold to dimensions. We did it at Echo Pond actually, and we had a hold to dimension, built all the cabinetry, showed up on site, realized that there was a site discrepancy that ended up changing the ceiling height by an inch. That didn't get communicated back to the mill worker. And that's just a process thing, right? Like, everyone's like, see, this is why we don't do it. I'm like, I would argue that that's not a reason to go back to the normal way of doing it. That is an opportunity to find how to prevent that in the future.
I mean, it's what we talked about today on our live workshop, that, like, that's a symptom of a problem.
Right.
Like, so to say we shouldn't do that, you're addressing the symptom and not the problem. Like, you should have a system in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it was literally like, oh, we should just like wait till plaster's done. I'm like, no. I'm like, where is the whole two dimension? It's right there. It's like, all right, pretend I have 150 pages of drawings. Do you think I'm noticing all of those notes? Well, probably not. Okay, what could you do? And this was a conversation we had, and it's like, well, I'm like, what if you made that red? What if you highlighted it? What if you gave them a drawing that was just, hey, here's your whole two dimensions with nothing else on it? Like, just improve it. Don't revert back to the way you did it before because it worked before. Like, this is a lesson. Learn and improve it. Yesterday, the entire Of Possible crew flew into Boston, and we spent all day going through Echo Pond and White Oak, and we set the stage. Hey guys, everyone is super proud of these projects. We're not talking about that today. Like, we are talking about what can we learn? What are the lessons, the things that we screwed up, the lessons that we learned? How do we walk away from these two projects and know that even though it felt like we put 100% in, like, we can do the next one better? That was one of the best days I've had in a long time, just like, because we've never really done that type of debrief. And we're walking around White Oak, and White Oak, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, White Oak's beautiful. Like, there's a ton of incredibly well executed details there. But there's 40 items that we can all talk about that says, all right, what did we learn there? Like, hey, yes, it did work, but it was actually a bitch to get to that point. Why? How did we miss that detail? Like, why did we end up with that when the intent was this? And it was just like looking over every single thing, and that's how you improve. Not, hey, that didn't work, go back to the other way.
Um, I agree. And I don't know what we talked about today on our workshop and systems and processes and what we're doing. It gets you thinking about just the different ways that you can do things and different systems that you can implement into your business. And I mean, even thinking about setting trusses by myself and John Marley convincing me that, yeah, you can definitely do this. For me, the way that I'm structuring my business and what I'm doing and trying to find things that work for me and thinking outside of the box has been so incredibly rewarding and also profitable for me, because I've let go of a lot of traditional methods and techniques that I would have just thrown manpower at. But I'm at the point now where it's like, if I don't want to assume the manpower and I don't want to add crews, like, how can I get this stuff done with alternative means? And it's opened the doors to a lot of options and opportunities that I probably wouldn't have considered if it was just like, well, yeah, I have guys that I have to keep busy. Because I think a lot of times that's what it comes down to, where it's like, hey, we have a job coming up. We need to throw these guys at that, or we need to make sure we have work for these people, that people. And like, is that the most efficient way of doing this stuff?
Well, let's go back to my insane idea of slipping a CLT cube into the backside of a row house. Like,
Yeah.
I could spend months figuring that out and eventually like have it pre-manufactured, shipped here, and then set up a crane and we'd slip that in. I'm oversimplifying that. Or it's like, oh, I have a couple carpenters that we need to keep busy for 3 weeks. Why don't I just have them frame out one of the couple of the floors in the row house and keep them busy?
Yeah.
I am choosing to do that because I need to solve a problem.
Correct. Like, you're still getting some work done and you're keeping people busy. And it's like, but in a perfect world, or in a world where you're structured to not have to absorb that, is there a better way of doing things? Is there a more efficient way of doing things?
100%. And I know there's a builder locally that I think is really good at this. I think he doesn't. I don't think he makes a lot of friends because he's really good at the fact that, like, if there's a better way to do it and that means getting rid of people, he's just like, all right, you're done. Like, see you later.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna, like, I actually don't need you to do this. And that's just a completely different mindset. But if you were to solely optimize for best product, best, execution, best process, it would force you to slow down. And I think, what we've talked about before is, the ability for you to kind of click into a lower gear and focus on your house and think through this stuff with the weight of, hey, I'm a solo, guy. I might have a hand where, what can I leverage? Where can I lean on a vendor or a manufacturer? Or is there a way to bring this particular process further along to then get the result I'm looking for? I'm going to make a wild, I'm hyped up. I think I've had too much coffee because I've been literally in this chair. I'm behind this camera all day. Yeah, all day. But there was a product, and I forget who makes it, but like someone decided to make these sheets of tile, and they're like, it's like full sheets of subway tile, like that are just like pre-done. You glue. You can basically, I'm saying glue. You can basically glue them to the wall, and like you can then you go grout and it's done. And on one hand, it's like, yeah, that ruins the art of tile, but like I can get on board with that mindset a little bit. But if your sole goal is to just get white subway tile up as quickly as possible, and you're building 100 units in a hotel, like, and it nets the same result, and it's not a shitty product, and it's not like, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I can sit here with a bunch of examples. Last one is in my commercial days, when I was doing a tower in Boston, they were all apartments, and every apartment, the electrician showed up with a 24 by 24 cardboard box, and he would put them in each unit, and it was the entire wiring harness.
Oh yeah.
They would wire the whole unit in their shop, and then have these quick connects that would just connect to the backside of the outlets, and then all they had to do was tie in the panel. And they started doing that, and they weren't allowed to do the plumbers weren't allowed to do hot work on site, so they would prefabricate all the shower valves in copper, and then everything else got pro pressed. And in Switzerland, they were building a multifamily, and they would do the entire wet wall on Unistrut, toilet, rough, sink, tub, valve, everything. And they would take this Unistrut wall and slide it into the bathroom, put it in place, and then they would extend the arms up and down and left to right and bolt it to this was a CLT building, and they bolt to the CLT, and all the plumbing was done.
That's nuts.
And it's at the end of the day, does anyone know? Do you know?
The other thing to consider, right, is I think a lot of times we're just looking at the cost of one component of this, right? And I look at even my roof and buying trusses for the roof and what the cost is, and then to crane and install. Is that cheaper than stick framing the roof? From a numbers perspective, it might not be. But when you look at it big picture, it's like, say all I did was install trusses or I just framed roofs. Like, that's all I did for a living. The amount of cost savings that I would have by using equipment and using somebody else's labor to fabricate these roofs and not having the overhead of employees to stick frame roofs, and my productivity, it makes so much more sense. Like, even for me, yeah, I could probably stick frame it for less money, but it changes the entire structure of my business and what I'm doing in order to make that happen. So when I'm looking at just the cost of them, yeah, like I could do it for cheaper, but it realistically is going to cost me time. It's going to cost me money. It's going to cost me overhead, liability, risk, insurance, all of that stuff, where it's like I could just be done with it. It's gonna allow me to do other things. And I think that oftentimes people feel that the number should be lower. And it may not necessarily be lower. The number may be more money than fabricating it on site, but it's going to give you an opportunity to be way more productive and also continue moving that project forward when you may not have the opportunity to do so based on weather conditions, field constraints, whatever it may be. Even the foundation, right? I don't need to get people to come and pour a footing and then strip the formwork down and then raise block walls, and it's just simplified, right? Yeah. I excavate it, I get my inspection, and then the walls are set and I'm done. There's no curing. Literally have a foundation in a day, which even if it were more money, there's a lot of value in that. Like, it doesn't come down to just the number at the end of it.
And to be clear, like, I think a silly argument that comes up, it's like, yeah, you're just ruining the craft by, doing all this stuff, prefabricating all this stuff. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm putting the guy that's doing it in a safer environment.
Yeah.
In a climate controlled environment. Again, go to my YouTube, look up Renglii, Renglii, I think. Mm-hmm. That facility is filled with craftspeople. And they're in there, and they're in an environment that's safe, using equipment that is moving this stuff around safer. They're not killing themselves working on the ground or lifting stuff up. And now, rather than like brute forcing their way through building, they're able to do high quality craft and focus on improving the quality rather than focus on not pulling your back out trying to flip a wall over.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're actually improving the craft.
I think there's so many opportunities to do that within business and just restructure the way that you're thinking and the way that you can do things. I do find it neat that as I've positioned myself in a role now that I never really thought I would be in, the opportunity to be able to execute bigger work than I ever really anticipated with less resources and less input, by just thinking outside the box has been very interesting. To be able to maintain a low overhead, to still be able to oversee what's going on, to still be able to be hands-on for as much as possible, and to be able to execute the amount of work that's necessary while not absorbing the overhead, even through equipment, whatever it may be, I think is very interesting. And you look at what Kyle's doing on his jobs and the amount of work and the size of buildings that he can build with two guys because he invested in equipment. And like you think of like what's the overhead of one qualified person a year when you're done paying benefits, salary, workers comp, insurances, payroll, all that stuff. You're at least in it for $100,000, probably more for a well-qualified employee. And when you think about the amount of equipment that you could purchase with that's going to continue to pay for itself year in and year out and doesn't require additional payroll, additional benefits, additional salary year in and year out, like you can build a pretty substantial business that can perform a lot of work through a lot of efficiencies and not have a crazy type of overhead of a 12-man team, a 24-man team, which I find very interesting, and I like approaching work from that angle.
That's why you're building a mini fleet of equipment.
Yeah, man, that's the goal. Just I'm gonna name the equipment Tyler 2, Tyler 3.
Instead of $2,000 a week for payroll, you're paying less than that a month for an excavator payment.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's true. So a lot of this conversation, and I think what we were thinking about was really, I would say, spurred from the live workshop that we had today. So if you guys are not familiar with that, not familiar with our circle community, we do have links for that.
Yeah, they'll be in the show notes below.
Yeah, in the show notes. Obviously, sign up for the newsletter. But just to speak briefly to that, a lot of this consideration for business and where business is going and the costs of business and what does scaling your business look like, what's your pre-construction process looks like, what's your employee onboarding process look like, what do your financial systems look like. We've been digging into that. We've been trying to wrap our heads around what that looks like, how we can communicate that properly to people, how we can really be able to support our community and Modern Craftsman community and bring everyone together to be able to help them as much as possible. And the first step in that is most definitely signing up for the newsletter and seeing what we offer there as far as show notes, what's going on, Nick's weekly emails, any free documents that we have. So definitely register for the newsletter. We also have our circle community, which has been really great to get that up and running. I spoke about this on the live workshop, but Nick sent me everything, said sign up, go on there, ask some questions, and I was like, all right, we got to get our feet wet, we got to break down some barriers, warm people up and start asking them questions so we can gain their trust, and then we'll get into like the deep dive, more personal questions. And so I asked like some very surface level questions, and then people are just like getting right to the meat and potatoes of it about like numbers and what this should be and how much you should spend on this. And I was like, all right, we're obviously comfortable here. So that community is really cool to hop on there and just see the exchange of people and knowledge and help, and just the questions that people are asking are such great, well thought out, important questions that I think everyone could benefit from seeing the answers to in the interactions.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, podcast, content, newsletter, all free. Closed community, our Modern Craftsman community, is a paid monthly fee. We have it on an introductory rate, which is only for a set amount of subscribers. I do think we're getting very close to the next tier, which it will continue to bump up on a monthly basis because we want to keep it tight. But the point there is like there's a paywall, keeps it serious. You guys get in there, and that's where you can get a ton of our resources that will be in there available to you. And just like Tyler said, like have an opportunity to have more open and honest conversations. And then Tyler and I were doing, a regular Q&A session that's only available to that community. So we'll do these workshops, or I'm sorry, these live Q&A calls in the community, and then if you're in our email list, you'll get notified for our monthly workshop, which is topic specific, open forum discussion style.
Yeah, so if you want something more than you are getting right now, that might be an option for you. Just a little bit more access, very affordable, and kind of the next step in the Modern Craftsman ecosystem. So I've been pumped to see the support on there. The interaction on there has been very enjoyable. So thanks to everyone who's been signing up. Thanks to everyone who attended that workshop today. If you didn't hear about that was somewhat last minute that we were, putting that on the radar and we were going to send it out. We still had a really good reception and a lot of people who hung around for the entire hour. But we're going to be doing more of them, whether they're the live workshop through the podcast or the live Q&A, which is behind that specific Modern Craftsman Circle community. There's definitely a way for you to get involved there. So if you have any questions, you can shoot us an email.
Yeah, either way, if you're part of the newsletter, you already know this. If you're not, you got to sign up for the newsletter. Show notes below, and again, free newsletter, but it's going to have all of the information on how you can join any of these live sessions and what we're doing beyond the podcast.
Sweet. Well, thanks everyone for hanging around.